Welcome back to Inspired Inc., the CWS podcast, the show we promote indie comic creators and become inspired by what they create and their journey of creating it. I'm your host, Brandon Bloxdorf, and today on the show we have Nick Burchard, creator of Vulture Culture, joining us, and we talk about finding your style in comics and drawing, how different mediums can consistently inspire your comic book work, and finding success at cons and tabling events. All this and so much more on today's Inspired Inc.
Wellspring.
So, like, what got you into like finding weird figures like that? Like, you're saying like Vikings and all that type of stuff. It's kind of vampires are right up your alley. Where did that kind of come from to become your aesthetic at that point?
This is a great first question. These are questions I've always wanted somebody to ask me. Why vampires? Why Vikings? Well, the reason my company is called Tiny Viking Productions, and I kind of have like a nickname in my friend group. Everybody calls me Tiny, because I'm 5'3".
Oh, damn.
I'm a short guy, and I wear that proudly. Actually, I don't think height should matter at all. We should all be happy with our bodies. Body positivity goes both ways.
It does, because that's a big stereotype with people in general. I mean, I struggle with stuff like that, and I work out and I do all that type of stuff, and I'm never satisfied. And then my girlfriend's always like, "Shut up! Like, you're healthy. You're like you're fine." Like, putting body stereotypes from what we see. We do this with art. We look at our Tony Daniels, or Jim Lee's, or Jason Fow books, and we compare our art to those type of drawings, just like we would ourselves to other people. And it's a weird thing that our brain tries to like constantly compare to something else to like achieve that greatness, quote unquote,
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've always been short. I've kind of come around on it recently. Like when I was in college, I mean, recently, I was like 5 years ago. Oh my God,
it all feels recent.
Like it was, old, then the pandemic, then everything happened. But anyways, I'll try to stay on topic. And so I was, kind of coming up with my company because I knew I wanted to do comics alongside filmmaking, and I kind of wanted to create an identity, like, a Walt Disney kind of identity, that I am not Walt Disney, but to have that kind of, kayfabe it a little bit, to use that word. So the idea of my heritage on my mom's side is Scottish Viking. So cool. So I've traced it back. I've done the whole lineage. We're from the Munro clan in Scotland, and that clan actually dates back to like the Vikings and things like that. There's deeper stories and stuff. So I just thought it was, and I'm French on my dad's side, so that explains the other book I sent you.
Yes.
But so on my mom's side, I'm Scottish Viking. On my dad's side, I'm a short Frenchman. So I just found that kind of funny that so it's rad. Like here's this like crazy Viking brow and all of this stuff in this tiny little French body. So I'm the Tiny Viking. So
dude, that's sick.
Long story short, that I kind of took something that I was a little ashamed about as a kid, being the short guy, and I was like, no,
you owned it.
Tiny, you're not short.
Just owned it. I mean, and
Tiny Viking.
That's what we do with our art and everything too. We own what we produce. We own what we are. And we own what it becomes, And I love that you've made who you are truly inside part of your brand, your image, your creativity at the same time. That takes a lot of, interpersonal work for one, and acceptance. And I think acceptance is something a lot of creators struggle with no matter what. We all have, identity crisis, and, we all feel like imposter syndrome at times. But being able to find a way to hone in on who you are truly and reflect that even within your art, I find that to be really commendable. It's something a lot of people really do truly struggle with.
No, thank you, man. Yeah, it took some work, on inside, and I still struggle with it. Like there are days where I'm like, man, I really am short. It's like I kind of laugh at it. It's not really like I'm short, like I used to be as a kid. Like, I'll never play basketball, or I'll never be a, what's another tall thing?
Job? I have no idea. What do tall people do? I can never reach high enough.
They're always good at reaching things. Like I'll be at the supermarket sometimes, and there will be a girl that's taller than me. I'm like, can you reach that, please? And she always laughs because, like, I don't know, it's funny.
It's cute. You know what I mean? Like, it's commendable. Like, I think, and I mean, well, we do that creatively too, I feel. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We're always trying to, figure out how to ways to accept what comes out of our hands and how shapes come out and how we configure drawings and proportions. And so like, comparing it to like in the same sense of you about your height, it seems very like, oh, this is an artistic struggle. This is just not only that, but like a humane struggle. Like we all go through these in different stages of what we handle in life, no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that that's also another kind of interesting way to look at it too. Is struggle is inherently what happens in comics, and what happens in film. I mean, if your character's not struggling with something, it's rarely very interesting.
Very
You
true.
know, I
Yeah.
think. So identifying even like the smallest little struggle, and you and I talked about this a little bit on the ink spotlight is
Mhm.
I don't plot.
Yeah.
I don't plot stories. I probably should. I'd probably make a lot better stories if I did, but they tend to be a little rambly at times, and I feel like if I had like a dedicated plot, that wouldn't happen. But like I have ideas of where things may be going in the
Mhm.
story, and but what I tend to do is I tend to just find characters that I find interesting, give them something to fight against, and or go up against, and I just kind of let them talk. And usually it's the other person it's the other character that is what the other person is going up against, and obstacles happen, and then you have a scene. And one of the big things that I always try to do with conflict is try to have at least some kind of resolution, whether good or bad, in every single scene that
Mhm.
is moving the plot forward. But the plot tends to reveal itself to you, once you're halfway through the script and you've written a handful of scenes that you find interesting, and then the plot is just kind of like, oh, that's what they're doing. And then once you figured out the plot, then you finish the thing, and you're like, oh, that's what it was about. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
then you find your theme. And it was funny because the book I'm doing the Kickstarter for right now, Squawk, which is vulture culture. I was talking to an editor about it before I decided to do it self-published, and he was kind of telling me, he's like, like, what's the point of this story? And I never really write with a point in mind. I very very rarely will do that, where I'm like,
Mm.
this is what I have to say.
Mhm.
Usually I think you find what you actually meant
Mm.
when you're writing it. So I think the act of writing reveals a lot about you, and all that pretentious, writers talk and stuff. I could talk
Yeah.
about writing all day, but
That's what we're
anyways.
here for, you know what I mean? Like, and I find that so interesting too because I'm someone who's now like, okay, I follow what's called like an armature. And that's essentially like I got it from Brian McDonald, who wrote this amazing book called Invisible Ink. I highly
Mhm.
recommend you check it out. I think you would love it because he's a filmmaker as well, and he works a lot with like Pixar and stuff like that. And they have a show called You Are a Storyteller, and I've recommended this to so many people because I think it's a great aspect to understand a little bit more craft. And what I got from him from right away, he talks about an armature, and that's essentially not your theme, but just like the point that's being made in your story. Really easy example: Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying, and how they keep on finding a way to represent that exact statement. And so throughout the entire film, when you watch it, you're kind of seeing how they portray that. And so when Red gets Morgan Freeman's character gets out of prison, or actually before that, there's the librarian who gets out of prison, and then he gets that grocery store job, and he's struggling, and he's living on his own, and he can't maneuver in this new modern world, and so he ends up hanging himself. And then Red, Morgan Freeman's character, same thing. He's working at the same grocery store. He's actually staying at the same place that guy was staying at, but he's making it work. And so they keep finding ways to say, get busy living or get busy dying. And that's portrayed over and over throughout the film as you watch it. And so I always try to think of a statement like Teenage Babylon is, why are some things more important than the end of the world? And that's, why is a heartbreak more important? Why is a pet's death more important? So whenever I get lost in my writing, or I'm like, where do I go with this scene? Where do I go with these characters? I go to my armature, my statement, and I'm like, that's my North Star. How do I convey my North Star in this? How do I bring that in? And that keeps me on track so I know where I'm going with my story. So I've slowly started to incorporate this practice into my stories, and it started to make it easier for me to like it's like when you play a video game and you haven't played in months, and then you're just like, what's going on? What I don't even remember the controls. Like, what's the mission? Like, who are these people? But it helps me guide myself, be like, oh, I know where I'm at. I know where to pick back up, and that's helped me in that, writer's like sense of like, oh, I could always pick up my story, and as long as I know my armature, I know where to go in that sense.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Why is a heartbreak? Why is the story? I'm paraphrasing,
Oh,
but why is the story I'm telling right now more important than the end of the world?
yeah.
Because I mean, that's what a lot of stories are about, is the end of the world,
Hmm.
and finding the way to make the small moments very important. I think is a really good mantra.
Yeah.
That's how did you come up with that?
I mean, when I was writing Teenage Babylon, I was trying to. It's a cosmic punk rock lore story, and I knew at the very end. So I ripped off this whole story from the Boxcar Racer album that Tom DeLonge did years ago, and I kind of found a story by listening to that album my whole life. And the end of it ends with the world ending, and he's essentially falling off a building, and the song's called Elevator, and it's about him falling. And then the last song is kind of like the credits, the title roll. It's an instrumental. And so I always knew my story was going to end with the end of the world and my main character kind of like sacrificing himself so that the world can be saved and whatnot. And so then I was like, okay, how do I peel this back even more and talk about this punk rock kid and the journey and everything? And so I wanted to talk about love and heartbreak, and I wanted to talk about like how things impact his death, or deaths around him. And it's one of those things where I'm like, all these moments when they happen, like when you go through a heartbreak, when you have someone pass away or your pet pass away, nothing else matters in the world. Like that's it. That's the focal point. The world could be blowing up around you, but like all you're fixated on is like this pain you're going through. So I wanted to like emphasize that, and that just became the armature for Teenage Babylon. And as I've been writing it, that keeps me going when I get stuck on scripts and finding a way to push that forward and push that point forward. And it's helped me be like, oh, now I need something devastating happen to show him like, okay, this death has happened, and then there's this crazy bigger stuff happening, but he's too fixated because he's a young kid that this is just that doesn't matter. Like, this girl broke my heart, this is all that matters. So I kind of
Well,
utilize that.
and kind of in a way, you're kind of saying both things. You're
Yeah.
kind of being like, what's more important than the end of the world? Well, if this is this person's world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think
Exactly.
it's cool. It's a good one. So
Yeah. It
I'm gonna
did.
steal that.
Read the Ashcan. I think I sent it to you in that email link. I think you'll
I
dig it.
just wrote it down too. So Invisible Ink,
That book is
and
amazing. I learned
yeah,
so much from it, dude. So much.
hmm that's cool.
And especially as a filmmaker, I think you'll appreciate his approach, because it's all film references basically that he's giving in there. So I mean, Paper Moon, stuff like that. He gives a great list of films to like reference and check out and see how that works exactly to that film.
Heck yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
And I mean, for those who like don't know too, like, you also do film stuff, and so you've
Mhm.
converted into comics, and a film is a group effort. I mean, you could do a one man show with the film. I don't know if you've attempted that. I wonder if like you would,
It'd be
or
tough.
yeah,
Yeah, I think I kind of get what you're going at, doing like kind of a one man show kind of thing with the film. I mean, YouTube is very much a
yeah,
one man show, and all of that, and especially vloggers and people who walk around with their cameras. I think that's if filmmaking is as much as anything else. But specifically, what I do with filmmaking is short films and narrative work and all of that stuff. I hate to be like, oh, I'm a storyteller, but
I mean, rightfully so.
because
You should, like, you do
yeah,
very commendable work. Especially, I mean, you showed me your short film, and just going through your book over the last week, it's been a lot of fun. Like,
oh,
there's a lot of
thank you.
joy in all that, despite like some of the tones and themes you have going on. I could sense like the joy that's being poured into your projects.
Yeah, I kind of don't do anything else. Really,
It's the right
I
way.
don't really do anything else. I kind of just like my job is in media and all of that. And I all my hobbies are media based. I burn out hard. So I
But
tend to like disappear for a bit. That's why doing vulture culture on my Instagram has been such like a guiding light, in the darkness, because it's like, well, every week I have to put out a comic for the next 2 years if I want to if I want to really, really make, something that means something to me. I don't know. I'm having trouble talking today, but yeah. So I do the filmmaking. I've done filmmaking my whole life, pretty much. Started out as a child actor in,
Wow.
Arizona. Grew up in Arizona, so I'm a Southwest kid like you.
Yeah.
And we were in LA for a bit. Then I moved back to LA after college. I've lived in New York City, but right now I'm kind of up in the Northeast in Vermont, which I love Vermont.
It's beautiful up there from what I've
Yeah.
heard. Man, that's
Hmm.
and what a transition. What's cool about that is that I think a lot of people forget like traveling is so vital to creativity. You kind of need to see the world a bit and, seeing the country back and forth on different coasts. I'm sure that's inspired you a whole lot and given you a different taste on like visionary stuff. Like whenever I go places and I see different architecture or seasons and everything, especially us growing up in the desert, seasons are just different to us. Like it snowed here, it tripped me out. I've never seen this much snow before, and it's like really unique, and it gives us stuff to like write about and tell stories about. Do you think all that travel and bouncing across the country has influenced some of your work or made an impact on how you create?
Well, it's funny you say that because it sounds like I've traveled a lot, but I've traveled a lot over my whole life. Where
Mhm.
it's like, we moved to Vermont when I was 8 years old, so
Oh, dang.
that transition was very interesting to go from a gigantic middle school in the Southwest to middle school. I was 8 years old, elementary school in the Southwest in third grade, where I had all these friends to move to this tiny, tiny little town in Vermont on the border of Massachusetts, where I had like 15 kids in my whole class.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Like it was really kind of a culture shock, because usually when you're in other schools, you can kind of like bob
Blend
and
in.
weave, and that's why I enjoyed high school and college a bit more, because I mean my high school was still pretty small, but I could still kind of bob and weave between people, and I was very Ferris Bueller in that way. I didn't really have any enemies. I kind of just liked everybody, and I tried to be as nice as I could, um, as much as a teenage boy can.
Yeah, yeah, right. But yeah.
But I did theater, and I did all of that stuff, and then I found kind of my love for writing and directing in high school. I was always drawing as a kid. I was always drawing in high school, so it's kind of I've had these two things that I've really always loved to do, which is drawing and create films. So you know I'm probably going to become an animator someday. Like that's probably just what's going to happen. I can animate, but I would never call myself an animator, because I just know like that's just insulting to actual animators who can really do it.
Why do you say
You
that? Is it like the consistency behind animation and like the structure that goes behind it or the time
That
consumption?
why I say I can animate, but I don't call myself an
Yeah,
animator.
yeah. Like
Okay,
why do you not put yourself up there or feel that
because
that's
I have so much reverence for the art of animation, and it's like if I could, I would do everything animated.
oh, wow,
In fact, a lot of my friends who are in my films are like, "Why didn't you animate this?" Like, you know, I'm like, because I mean, I like pretty images too.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
like
I
I
don't got
like real life
5
stuff too.
years to I wanted to get this out now.
I, you could pump out a short film in like 2 months, man, if you got enough money for it. I mean, from like production
Oh
to
yeah, yeah,
editing
yeah.
and all of that stuff. But again, I don't want to. I have a lot of reverence for filmmakers too.
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
but yeah, the thing about animation is it's just so all consuming, and you kind of can't take a break from it once you're involved. And it's similar to film, but a friend of mine told me one time when I was hiring an animator for a sizzle reel that I was doing for a pitch, and for this Viking series that I'm still trying to do as a comic, but I'm not ready yet. I wasn't ready then. I don't know why I was so gung ho about it, but doing a sizzle, I hired an animator, and the animator was going slower than I would have appreciated, because I needed I was I only had so much money to do this thing, and the returns weren't great on it, and I was kind of getting frustrated. So I reached out to my producer, and I'm like, I know it's not their fault. They're working as hard as they possibly can with the budget that I've given them. And I'm like, when I was when I direct films and things like that, and when you direct films, because he was a filmmaker too, I say, I said to him, we have people begging us to work with us, even for free,
Yeah.
like, to hold the boom or be an extra. And, it's like, why aren't animators, begging to work on projects and things like that? And he goes, well, it's totally different because the film can, and this is kind of a jaded way to look at it, but I understand and it's
Mhm.
true. He goes, the film doesn't happen unless this animator works. Like they are doing the film. You
Yeah.
are paying them to make your film. He goes, if you don't have an extra, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, your scene isn't as, lively, and stuff. But, and that's not, to downplay one to raise up the other. I'm just saying is that was kind of an interesting lesson to learn. So I've kind of always held animation in my head as like, oh, wow, yeah, you're actually kind of at the mercy of the animator sometime.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're not at the mercy of the people that you're working with on the crew, and you have to be a good collaborator. And that's why I kind of was like, we'll let this project kind of fizzle out a little bit, and the animator, and having one person working on your entire thing, that's a lot to ask. And that's why animation teams are a thing. So I've definitely learned a lot
Yeah.
in my years doing this kind of stuff. But animation is just, it's that thing I just can't quite figure out,
I mean,
how to do.
it's so cool about like what we do and what we get involved with because like a lot of creators I talk to have film backgrounds, have music backgrounds, storyboarding backgrounds, and everything, or just or diving into some of that stuff at the same time, or finding and igniting a love for it. But what's great about like creatives like us is that we have these giant impossible looking goals almost, and we're like, how am I going to inch my way towards that? Like, what are the steps I'm taking now to be there in 5 years or 10 years or something? And none of us really, not all of us give us like a timeline, but we know that we're going to at least have that in our, portfolio at some point by the time we're like done on this earth, we have like a mindset of this seems impossible, but I'm going to find a way to get there. It's just going to take me a little bit of time to figure out. And not a lot of people outside of creatives have that same mindset. And animation seems like such a, even for like to me especially, it seems like such an abstract, like that's impossible. I don't know if I'd ever get to that route, but that'd be so sick. But especially as an artist yourself who's drawing and trying to reach up to that level, it's a huge artistic goal to get there. There's so many skill sets you need to have. There's so many things you have to know how to just pull out of your back pocket and like, express yourself in the sense of like making things faster express. Like, how do I speed all of this up and make it efficient and tight and my lines very clean? And like that's where the power of the line I feel really comes into play is animation. We all do a lot of cross hatching in our drawings and extra stuff, but animation is so clean. You have to know the power of the line so well and how to make distinct figures and like that.
Yeah, and that's also something I kind of struggle with a little bit, is because I almost have two art styles too, and I feel like people are starting to get to know me more for the vultures,
Mhm.
and which I find really interesting, and I'm happy about it. And they see this like very simplified, artwork,
Yeah.
simplify, man, and
Which is great. I respect that so much. I'm trying to understand that more too.
however, uh, I can also really draw.
Yeah.
And like I really, really love drawing. And that's why, while I'm doing the vultures, I'm also kind of doing this other secret book that
Mhm.
I've showed you a little bit of. And that one is kind of riding the line between being simple and being like really, really epic and well drawn and all of that. So I think where I'll wind up someday is somewhere between like this is stupid to say, but somewhere between like Scotty Young and like Charles Schultz. I feel like I'll
Oh,
wind up
cool.
like somewhere in between there,
That's an amazing
because
like mindset and goal to like push yourself towards though.
like I'm working like towards this very cartoony style, but at the same time it's still very like comic booky and energetic and
Mhm.
and all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm kind of babbling.
No, no, no. That's wonderful because like it goes back to what you just said, simplified, and having that simplified mindset. I personally, like as like someone who's drawing and learning how to draw, I feel like that's the hardest part. Is like, how do I stop adding more detail to this and I just make it a clean, simple figure? You know, I mean, the apps, the artist edition you have right behind you, that's prime example of like simplified like Batman. You know what I mean? There's no crazy like technical stuff to his suit. There's no crazy technical stuff to his like, you know, his cape or any of that. It's so, you know, it's very 1966 Batman put into the 80s, you know, and
Absolutely.
that's as simple as you can get. But it takes a lot of precision to make all of that stand out and look like fully fleshed out in that sense, if that makes sense.
If I can say one thing, the hardest thing for me to draw my entire life is Batman.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I have no idea how to draw Batman.
It,
And you would think it's just Batman. Like, I can draw Batman. It's not a good Batman. Like, it is not a good Batman. And I look at people who can, like, you know, like, I look at that beautiful book over there and I just go, how?
yeah.
How did you do this?
I've
Like,
stared
I
at that
see
single
what you're
picture
doing.
so much and I'm just like, I'm not getting that. Like,
It's like, I see what you're doing. I totally know what you're doing, but I just cannot draw Batman. And like, Batman's my favorite character.
yeah.
And like, I would love to draw Batman someday. If I ever got offered that job, I'm like, you should not have me draw Batman. Like, as much as I want to, yeah, I'll write it, but
Yeah,
you should not have me draw Batman. Because he is such a simple shape, but and there's so many ways of drawing him, and like, every time I try to draw him, I try to do like just the silhouette. Like, oh, what if he's just like this weird silhouette moving thing? And I'm like, that's not my Batman. Like,
right.
Like, all these artists have their Batman. And I feel like that's something I'm also striving towards, is what is my Batman?
Yes. Dude,
Like,
yeah.
how do I draw mine? And I don't know yet.
Dude, I completely understand. It's funny that you say that too, because this weekend I was like, oh, I have some free time. I should just spit out a drawing. I haven't, just to kind of catch up and start the new year, you know, strong and not just spilled ink drawings. And so I was like, you know, I was asking my girlfriend, what should I draw? And she's like, oh, you know, I want to watch Titans. So why don't you do Nightwing? And I was like, if I'm doing Nightwing, I'm going to do Batman with it. And so like, I started the Batman drawing and I started and I was like, I already hate this because I know I suck at Batman and Batman's super hard. And I started doing it. And I'm really happy with this Batman drawing. I'm not like happy in the sense I love it and it's a great Batman. I'm happy because it's the best Batman I've done yet. And it's funny you even mentioned it today, because tonight on Spilled Ink we're drawing Batman, and I found that out once I was halfway done inking my Batman piece, and I was like, I could have saved this for Spilled Ink this week, but I'm starting over a new one today, and I'm like, I'm gonna get Batman down this year. I think that's gonna be a goal. But what you're saying about making your own Batman, it's so true. I mean, Spider-Man is almost like Universal, where we all kind of just retweet just hints, you know what I mean? Just small parts of him. But Batman, you could really create as your own character and your own version. And that takes just a lot of like, okay, let me look at all my favorite outfits and designs here. And how do I pick apart what I love the most about each of them and then combine them into one? But like, just in general, his anatomy is a little odd, like with his suit, with the cowl. I think the cowl is what throws everybody off that wants to do Batman really well, and understanding his bulkiness on what level you're putting him. There's no standard Batman in that sense.
I want to get back to Batman, but I did want to ask you, you were watching Titans, or Teen Titans?
Oh, it was the live action one. We're just throwing a thing. Teen Titans is awesome. I'm not a fan of the live action.
Is one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, that's top tier.
I've loved Raven for many years, and that's a dream of mine, is to write a Raven story someday. Because I'm a very, very, very big fan of that character, and I feel like I would have a lot to bring to that table. I often think, you know, like there's the guy, I'm blanking on his name, but he does like the modern day Teen Titans on Instagram, and he just did the Raven and Raven Loves Beast Boy and all that stuff.
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah,
I forget his name.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about though. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I believe he's Brazilian or something. I'm not sure, but anyways, he does really great work, and I look at his work and I go, that's not how I would have done Raven.
Oh yeah,
like
Yeah.
It's they're hipster Teen Titans. Like
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what it's supposed to
Modernized,
be.
like,
That's what it's trying to be. They're hipsters, and I'm like, Raven should be emo.
yeah,
Like
100%.
Raven
Yeah.
should be goth. Like
Yeah.
actually, and as the dude who does the funny goth bird comics, I'm like, I could do it. I could do Raven justice.
We gotta do once IC3 passes, we should bring you back on the show and we'll do a Titans night on Spilled Ink and throw
I
down
would
on that.
absolutely,
I think that'd be
I
a
would
lot of fun.
absolutely draw Raven. Raven's another character that's hard to draw.
Oh, I could imagine that actually. What do you think is the difficulty on something like that? Like what gets you to think that becomes a hard character for you?
Well, number one, I mean, I used to struggle a lot drawing women as a kid and like a teenager. I remember one time I was in high school and I was drawing Catwoman, and this girl comes over to me, and I was learning anatomy and curves. That women have more curves than men, obviously, and kind of when you're starting out drawing women and you have no idea that that's like the mindset is like curves,
Yeah.
especially comic book women. You kind of draw these weird like lizard people with boobs. You're like, that's not quite right. But and so I was really doing like kind of a curvaceous Catwoman, and this girl comes up to me and she yells in the whole library. She goes, "Damn, Catwoman's got a butt!" And I was like, "Ah, no!"
That's hilarious. It's also, yeah, it's one of those things too. Yeah, I would say it's probably traumatizing hearing that as a kid, because you're like, I'm trying to be respectful and not like over pretentious or anything, you know what I mean? Like, and you're just like, oh, I'm trying to find the middle ground and I'm still learning. Like, I don't know what's too much or too
But
little.
it's
Or
like
just
at
like,
the same time, yeah, Catwoman does have a butt,
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, stuff you have to like emphasize in that. It's like when you draw Nightwing, you have to draw the butt on Nightwing. You know what I
oh
mean?
yeah,
It's the same
Nightwing.
thing. Yeah,
Nightwing
like
needs that booty. But anyways, so drawing women was kind of difficult for me as a kid, and then I always write female characters in my stories. I don't even ask why. That's just naturally where I go to as
Mhm.
a writer. I think it's just an easy way for me to get into that like fantasy world of
Yeah.
like, oh, what would it be like to think this way, or what would it be like to experience the world in this point of view. And I just naturally gravitate towards that. I can write men. I do it all the time too, but women are typically the protagonists of my stories, and so meant I had to get decent at drawing women. So I really, really worked at it. So I think Raven, in a lot of ways, to answer your question, is almost like the same difficulty as Batman is. It's a very simplified shape with the, it's like the Assassin's Creed,
Yeah.
beaked hood. And like you gotta get it right, and at the same time, she's a woman, and that's difficult for certain people to draw. Especially when I was a kid, it was difficult to draw. So it was like I always
female
gravitated
faces
towards.
are hard for me to like carve out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's that little rounded thing, and to talk, very anatomy about it. It's the rounded thing, and have you seen the image of anime girls and how their silhouettes are like cats?
Oh, I saw that one time and I was like, this makes so much sense actually. Like,
It really does, and it kind of throws you for it because you're like, wow, yeah, they really do draw them like cats. Because you don't really notice it when you're watching.
And I mean, I think manga and anime, that's what they're based. I've found this out recently because I'm not a big manga anime person. I'm learning a lot, but that's pretty much how you differentiate manga or anime from other cartoons, is that all the characters are basically based off of like a cat perception. You know what I mean? All of the characters look like a cat in a sense. And then when I started looking at these people and I'm like, oh, like you look at the eyes and the nose and how it meets to their mouth expression, that totally adds up and makes sense. And it takes a lot of like, let me stare at my cat for a minute while I watch this cartoon and see if I could like really make sense of it. And it really does. And if you start tracing outlines of, like a cat head, you could actually shape it into somebody very easily.
Yeah, and it also very much justifies cat girls in anime because it's like, oh, they're already there, just add ears.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
And it's like that's why it works, because they're already based on felines and stuff, cat girls and cat boys in anime. Anime is very interesting. I love it.
Yeah, honestly. And did that help you like understand female anatomy a bit more? Like what made it really click for you for female anatomy?
Well, I don't really know any teenage boy, pre-teenage boy in the 2010s, early 2000s that didn't watch anime and try to draw anime girls. So that was definitely a big factor for me. It's trying to like, especially Raven. I mean, I really did kind of figure out how to draw, you know, women through Raven, and maybe that's why I drew so much goth girls, because like that was the first one I really figured out.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know. But yeah, no, I think it's just you learn and you grow and you just keep trying. But I learned to draw through YouTube. Like I owe my entire drawing skill set to like Draw with Jazza on YouTube.
Cool.
And I don't really watch much of his modern stuff anymore because it's very YouTube now.
Oh,
And
yeah.
but back when he was just a dude sitting in his like apartment just with his Cintiq, just being like, here's how you draw a head. I'm like, that is so helpful. Thank you. And like you can go back and like figure out how he did it and watch all of them. So yeah, that YouTube is totally, if anybody ever asks me like how do I learn how to draw, I'm like, do not get a how to draw book. You will not figure out how to draw.
They
Like
have
you need to
not
watch it.
benefited me at all.
No.
Yeah. I have a couple of them. I think the best ones that I have utilized are the how to think when you draw, because the how to think when you draw lets you do it in your own style, and you're kind of just getting the like, okay, this has curves here, like notice that, like this does a twist, and remember, this part's outlined, so it gives you like the preliminaries for it, but it's not telling you, okay, you start with a line and then you do this and you add a cone and then you add a circle here. It doesn't do any of that. It's more of like, here's the image and here's what shapes the image. And that has helped me be like, okay, so I got to like reverse engineer this. And then I do it my own way. And now I'm getting what I need to draw, but without that step by step. But I'm going through videos a lot more to help me understand drawing, because honestly, the How to Draw by Stan Lee or Marvel Comics way, that book like did not help me at all. It's one of those where I'm
No.
like, okay, here's a circle, and then you do a little bit of some extra lines, and then there's Daredevil, and I'm like, I'm missing like 3 steps on this. Like, there's not.
It's like that SpongeBob scene where he's in art class with Squidward and he's like, first I draw this head
Yeah.
and then I erase some of the details.
Yes.
And now we have a circle. And it's like, come again?
But yeah, yes, exactly, dude.
Yeah.
Drawing is I mean, especially I'm only about like a year. I'm not even a whole year into like me actually trying to take drawing seriously a bit. But it's crazy how many shortcuts you can take. And I've noticed that the more shortcuts there are, the harder it's going to be down the line. Like if you kind of try to cheat yourself a little bit and skip out of just noticing how things function work, it's just going to be really mind boggling for you on the way down. So I'm really trying to like reverse and back up and understand my shapes and cylinders and stuff like that, and doing like preliminary sketches like crazy, and building upon it, because when I was just trying to slap stuff on and like, oh, this works, and it's like, it doesn't work. Like I need to really break it down to the core.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. My biggest fear, and this has happened a few times and it's starting to happen less, which I'm happy about, it used to happen a lot, is I would draw something, I'd be really, really proud of it. And then I'd go back and look at it like a day or two later and I would go, this is awful.
I understand that
I can't
much.
believe I thought this was good. And it's starting to happen less. Like one of the vampire books that I did a while ago, which I believe I sent you as well. I'm looking back at that one and I'm like, yeah, there's mistakes here and there in anatomy and like posing and stuff, and sometimes they look a little too posed and maybe the eye is a little off, but I'm like, overall these are good drawings, like they're decent drawings, and I'm starting to hopefully feel that way about as I go forward. Like as I was putting together this omnibus for Vulture Culture, I'm like looking back at the first character drawings that I did of them and I'm like, oof, that they've changed a lot since now. Like Jean is a lot more blocky. And it's funny how that happens, how you kind of start with like a very loose, like even the old Peanuts, Charles Schultz, and I actually like the original Peanuts better than the newer.
I can understand that. Yeah, for sure.
Like from like the 1950s when like Charlie Brown was like, he was more of an oval shaped and he almost had like kind of a Stewie Griffin appearance, in a way. And I thought those lines were way more tight and it was a cleaner comic, and I personally enjoy that better. However, there's no denying that like what he did later, that's the Peanuts.
Yeah. I guess
you know,
it became
and
more refined and like mainstream in a sense to like really make it where it changed over the years, I would assume.
tr- true, actually, yeah.
It's like
And
The
but
Simpsons, like their
it's
first
funny though, his line
season.
got squigglier as he did
Oh.
it. So it's like, I wonder if that was like a conscious choice. Like Charlie Brown has quite a squiggly line.
Mhm.
You know, if you actually get in and look at it, you know, Snoopy is like one of the greatest character designs of all time. I mean,
Honestly.
truly. Yeah. No, I mean, Charles Schultz, I used to not really like his style. And then as I get older and have done a comic strip myself, I'm like, wow, no, he actually was like as good as everybody says. You know, I feel like everybody goes through those phases, especially as a cartoonist, where they're like, that mainstream guy, he's not so great. And then you're like, no, he's
It's
mainstream
pretty
for a
good.
reason. He's a
Yeah.
genius.
Yeah. No, honestly, it's something you want to like hate on a little bit, but like, hey, well, they know what they're doing, and it's working out really well for them, you know. And people do that
Yeah.
with bands and art. I mean, we talked about punk music, you know, our first, you know, talk and everything, and that's a big thing. People consider some bands sellouts when it's like, you know what, that just worked. Like, I wouldn't consider. I mean, I'm not a big Green Day fan anymore, but like, I wouldn't
Oh,
say they sold out. They're just making the music they like more, and it appealed to major labels and whatnot, you know?
I've seen Green Day 5 times.
That's sick. That's cool. I've never
I
seen them.
love, oh, you want to be a fan of Green Day? Go see Green Day live.
Oh yeah,
It,
you can't deny
it'll
like their
either,
performance. Yeah.
it'll either make you go, no, I was right about Green Day. They're not for me. Or it'll make you go, holy crap, Green Day is the greatest band of all time. And they're incredible. Uh,
I mean, it's
it's
like
funny. There's a,
I'm a Blink
yeah,
182 fan over Green Day, and it's like I would never say
really
Blink sold out. Yeah, I'm a huge Blink fan. I'm a huge Tom DeLonge fanboy for sure.
cool.
But
I can't say I'm a huge Blink fan. It's funny you say that. I mean, I respect them, and you know they're a great band, but I'm not like, I don't go back to Blink like
I'm
over and over
always
and
going
over
back to
again.
Blink. You can check out the Comix
That's
Wellspring, but you know I'm making posts when I'm putting like a Blink song on the thing. But it's one of those things like, you know, artists like they consider people like changing their style to meet certain criteria, or you know, musicians, bands, filmmakers even start to get put into that. You know, people started hating on Spielberg for just doing all this stuff and becoming too big and mainstream, and I'm like, no, like they're approaching their craft differently. They're experimenting. They're trying to refine stuff to make it easier for them and keep it fresh for themselves too. I feel like that's one of the best things about seeing creators evolve is like I think they're just trying to stick it through. Like we spend all these years to most likely you spent like, you know, 5, 10, 15 years just trying to break into getting noticed in general. And then you want to keep it fresh for yourself. You want to keep it to where you're not dreading the routine of every day. So I feel like that evolution really does mean a lot to a lot of people. But then you're also separating your fan base at the same time. You could actually split your audience by trying to evolve and not deliver what everybody, I guess, quote unquote, expects from you in that sense.
one of my favorite bands, because we were talking about bands, and I think that this is kind of a cool way to tie those last two thoughts together that you just did. Is King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Have you heard of them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. Dude.
They are going to be such an important band
Yeah.
in like a few
Dude.
years. I mean, they're already a very important band, but they're going to be, unless they like fizzle out and die, which I don't think they will.
You're so
But you want
busy.
to talk about reinventing yourself every album cycle,
Mhm.
and even the fans get so divided, but they're like,
But it's really good.
man, it's still really cool though. It's like I've even had a few albums where I'm like, that is not for me, and I don't like that album, but I'm like, I know they're having a great time.
Mhm.
And I respect it because they've given me so much music that I love. I've seen them a bunch too.
Oh,
You
sick.
should go see Gizzard
I would
if you
love to
if
see
you
them. I
can.
haven't yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like that even pertains to you and your artwork. You know, when you look at the project that you kind of have in secret and you're working on right now versus, you know, Vulture Culture, the styles are different enough to where you have this cartoony strip, you know, like simplified way, but then you have your really like more detailed version. And I think that probably keeps you like, okay, which one is going to appeal to me more like right now? And it keeps it fresh for you. Do you feel like that really does pertain between the two series?
The main reason I started doing the other one, which is a more historical, like Monty Python's Holy Grail kind
Love
of
that. Yeah.
comic. It's swords and sorcery and that kind of stuff. From a very well known historical figure, I'm having so much fun with it because I go down rabbit holes. I get obsessed with things very easily, um, and I just don't stop. And then I get to the point where I'm like, well, I have to either like make a movie about this or I have to make a book about this. And usually making the book about it is typically, the way I go about it. Because books are immediate. Books are definitely more streamlined because especially if you can draw, you can do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very good ways at getting better at your craft, and they're very, very, good ways of, marketing an idea. And I hate to use that word marketing. However, with the historical figure book versus vulture culture, the main reason I really got going into that book, just besides the obsession that I found about this historical figure and going down that rabbit hole, was I really just needed color. Vulture culture is a black and white book, and I drop color into it every now and then, but I really just needed like that historical figure book that I sent you is so vibrant, is so colorful, and so insanely detailed. And detailed, it's cartoons, but it's so colorful. And maybe someday I'll do a colored version of vulture culture, but I really think it works black and white. It's a punk comic.
I think it works so well, especially with like the themes you have going on there. It suits it and the characters that are going on. Like that black and white is really definitive for it. I feel like maybe, I mean, if you ever wanted to do an exclusive colored edition, that's kind of cool just to get that insight, or maybe like even posters or pinups would be really cool. But like a whole book recolored, I mean, unless you have some money flowing in, I don't know how that would work so well. I mean, The Walking Dead's doing it, but that's like they're doing
Walking
it for
Dead
a cash
colored
grab.
is interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah, honestly,
because like again, I think so much of what made that book cool is that it wasn't black and white, especially during like the Image Comics days and stuff. And it was totally different than anything they were doing. And but black and white comic strips, they have colored versions too. But I just think all the punk comics that I've seen, and I mean your punk rock anthology was very cool. Thank you for sending that.
Of course.
And I just look at it and I'm just like, yeah, black, white, and red just really works with punk. I don't know why.
I mean,
those are the colors.
That's why we did the Ashcan for Teenage Babylon, just black and white. I have another book coming out, Fake Your Death with China Rosemaria, and we decided it was supposed to be 4 short stories that is basically turning into a trade at this point. But it's all black and white too. We just felt like it felt the mood and the aesthetic of the story. And when you know how to utilize that right, and you have the right, artists or creators behind it, it can work so well. And honestly, and as an indie creator, putting out a black and white book, probably one of the smartest things you could do for print costs, to be honest. And like making even little at home zines or printables and stuff like that, like it does make some things promoting yourself and getting out there a lot easier to just do. That first Teenage Babylon Ashcan, I just got that done. I mean, I only had like $80 to try to get printing done at that point. And so I talked to like a local small printer, and I mean, of course, I'm always print with Comix Wellspring, but like I just had to get like some Ashcans out. So I got like 100 copies, and it's just black and white, and it's a cool little freebie now, So those like
Ashcan?
Yeah, so I refer to it as like an Ashcan because of the size. Let me see if I have one near me. I think I might. I thought I did. I think my cat's knocked over, but like since
I just don't know what an Ashcan is.
Like I use an Ashcan as like a promotional piece. They would use Ashcans like especially with early comics or indie comics, and it's like a preview almost. So it's a little bit smaller than your regular comic, and it's kind of meant to like bring interest to the book. So I try to do those as like a promotional thing to like, oh, this is smaller, more digestible, but it's going to get you interested to look into it. It's like a level up from a mini comic in a sense,
Yeah, exactly. And with this new omnibus, once it gets funded, this is an 8x10 book, so it'll be pretty big. And I'm going to keep it relatively affordable, because I again think comics should be for everybody, but at the same time I'm still going to be printing my, smaller little zines of the collections of ultra culture and things like that. So volume 1, volume 2. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, I know exactly what that is. I just didn't know it was called an ash can.
Cat.
Hello, cat.
Yeah, Booby is just all over me today. Yeah, so like, and I love doing it because you know what? I got like it is a bit more of a punk vibe. It's like a good. I never feel bad if I give these away for free because it only cost me a couple bucks on just some toss away
Yeah.
paper, and then like I sell like the really nice, pretty copies that I get done printed through Comix Wellspring for actually like $5, $6, and that way. I have my nice copies to give away, and then you have your freebie promos just to, hey, check this out. I want you to hear more about me and what I'm doing type of thing.
That's a big problem I have at cons is I give away so much stuff.
Same.
I'm
Same.
just take it.
I'm
You're
learning
clearly
that, though.
looking at it. Like, thank you. Take it. Just enjoy it.
It's one of those things, especially when you're starting out and just trying to get some attention and grow your brand. And my cat's tail is just whipping me in the face. Grow your brand and just get people to know about you. It's also a good gesture sometimes. Like, hey, let me just give you a book. Like that way we can stay connected and we could kind of like see each other grow. Finding a way to do free stuff and not have it impact you financially too much. It's a weird puzzle. And I've given away too many copies of like Shadow Anthology or like, CyberSync for free where I'm like,
the expensive ones.
Yeah, I was like, I should have done that. Or, but
I'm sure I'm going to be doing that with this book. I'm going to just take it, clearly enjoy it.
But I mean, when you're growing,
it's $20 on me. Like,
it's your first couple, release or something. I don't see the harm in it because you're trying to do it with good intentions. You're not just trying to dish it out for like, oh, just please read this. It's more of like, hey, I just want you to check this out. I think you'll enjoy it. And, you'll support me. I'm sure you'll support me more later by this gesture, but also the quality of what I'm about to give you. I'm hoping this interests you enough to support me down the line. And you do that early in your career, you can stop doing that like a year or two into it because people will actually be supporting you. So there's some pros and cons,
Pros and cons. Speaking of cons, I never want to be the guy who is grumpy at a table at a con. I never want to be that guy. Like vibes. I'll talk all day. And maybe it's just because I'm in my like kind of first year doing cons. Like, you see me at independent or IC3. It's easier to say IC3.
Yeah.
Comics Creator Con.
Yeah.
It's if you see me there, I'll talk to you for hours if you come over.
When we first met,
we'll have a
super sweet, super open. You were very like, you're telling me everything that you had out there. I was even overwhelmed at the moment because I was adjusting to the scenery and what was going on, but you were so humble and you were so like welcoming to your table. And even when I was like figuring out camera stuff for the first time, it was my first attempt doing any of that stuff. And you were just like, oh yeah, dude, figure out your stuff, come back. I'm going to be here. Like, it's great seeing you. You were so nice on that. And that goes so far. Because if you have a bad interaction with someone at a table and if they're grumpy, you're straying away not only collaborators, potential job offers, but also fans and your audience. And so like just toughing it out and having that good attitude for those, few hours, it goes such a far way to whoever you may, because you never know who you're going to bump into in the beginning or at the end of your day. So you need to have that positivity in that sense.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's this, self-benefiting factors of it too. But, I also I really try to just look at it from the other person's perspective. Number one, because I've been at cons where I've had people grab me and like just as a fan at the cons, they've grabbed me and said, look at my book. And I'm like, I don't like that.
Yeah, it's a little rough.
What I do is when somebody's walking by my table, I go, hey, how are you? And if they stop, I say, are you enjoying the con? And usually they're like, yeah, I had a great time. I'm like, what tables have you been to? Because like, I need to know where people are going, And then once they tell me that, I'm like, where are you from? Like, let's actually engage in a conversation. And then I tell them about my book. Well, clearly they've stopped. Clearly we're getting along. If you're curious, take a look. I hand them a temp copy. They usually flip through it and they go, cool, thanks. And they say, have a good one. Because it's not ever, when you're at a con, I feel like a lot of people think it's about you and your product.
Yeah.
Rather than it's about making the people who came to the con have a good time. Yeah. And making comics an exciting place to be.
Uh-huh.
Because it is an exciting place to be, and it's never like, oh, maybe I'll get something from this person if I'm nice to them, because you're not. People are very good at just walking by your booth and not saying anything to you, and that's fine.
Yep.
But I think, I don't know, like, the way I look at it is, I'm like, maybe they'll go buy something from somebody else. Like, maybe they weren't ready to buy something from me, but like, maybe I put them in a good mood, and then they're going to go be nice to another creator. And like, that is a good energy to bring
Mm-hmm.
to any place you go to. And I'm seriously not trying to make it like, oh, I'm only nice to people so they go do something nice for somebody else. It's like, there's so many weird people in comics. Just like, let's just try to make this a cool place.
Yeah.
Please.
Like, make it comfortable for everybody. I mean, when you
Yeah.
have a place like a convention, you have a lot of introverted people, and that's coming from creators and the people attending, a lot of, just fans are people who just, they're hobbyists, and so this is their passion. This is what they love. They don't create it typically, but they're there because of they fit in there. This is their community. This is where they feel the safest. There's weirdos like them. It's like when we first got into punk and started going to shows and everything. You're like, oh, I feel safe here. These are people that are into everything I'm into. I don't know how to express that yet sometimes, and you just kind of, everyone gets a little anxious and a little like, oh, I don't know how to like approach or talk. But once you start breaking down that friendly barrier and be like, hey, there's nothing to be scared of here. We're all a little weird. We're all a little crazy. We're all like, doing this, but we're here together. And that's why I always, I compliment cosplayers. I compliment, people with their kids, bring them in. I'm like, that's so rad. You're like showing them this stuff. And I always bring like free bookmarks or like stickers or a flyer or like a mini comic or something that I printed and folded out, and that way it's just like, oh hey, why don't you check this out, and that way at least they're getting something out of it, whether it be a bookmark or something they put on their water bottle, but it's something to remember by, but also be like, oh, I got this for free from that person, like I didn't have to pay $5 for this or anything. But then it can
And
also
it
lead
doesn't
to
hurt
sales and friends.
that also the Instagram tag is right at the bottom of it. And they're like, I had a good experience with that. It's like, you can market without being like a salesman.
Yeah.
Like, the person is at a Comic-Con. Clearly they like comics. They're already buying what you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
They're not buying it, but they're already like, oh crap, you have a book? Neat. Or sometimes they're like a dad and they're like, I had this happen at Springfield Comic-Con. This dad had his kids and his kid was running around and he's like, my kid really likes Catwoman. I'm like, oh, cool. He goes, you have a Catwoman print? I'm like, yeah. He goes, how much? Like, he was so uninterested in buying my product. He was like, I just need to get something for my kid. Like, enjoy.
And that's a win. That's a score for like both you and the parent, because I'm sure the parents are just lost, being in this universe and this culture, just like any of us were at first. I didn't know, when my first few conventions I went to, I wasn't so aware of how indie worked or how it operated or what it meant. I just always feel like it was the people attempting to try to make it into the big leagues. And you never really consider like, as an entry, and I'm talking about like entry level mindset of going to a con without knowing how comics work or any of that. You're really just like overwhelmed, being like, I thought this was all DC and Marvel stuff, but look at these other like big publishing houses. Look at all these other people trying to get into those publishing houses or creating their own. Comics get that much more bombarded. People complain in general about like, I'm not too sure where to approach comics because I don't know where to start. And it's like when you walk at a convention, it's really that entire feeling over again, where you're like, do I go with the stuff I feel familiar with, or do I go check out all this interesting new stuff that is just very foreign to me in a sense? And so being a friendly face and inviting them into that environment and into that indie realm, it's really important, because you can stray someone away from indie completely by just having the wrong attitude right off the bat.
Yeah, like somebody grabbing me at a Comic-Con and be like, look at my book. And like, I was kind of not too friendly to them because I was like, please don't do that to me.
Don't.
Please don't touch me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm here to have a good time. Like, I had books in my backpack. Like, Tony McMillan was at that con. Like, we traded books and I bought one of his books and it was like, how you doing, man? It's good to finally meet you. He's such a great guy.
Oh, I love Tony. Yeah. Yeah. He's the best. We're having him on Spill Ink at the end of January too. Super hyped to get him on there.
Yeah, he's a fellow Northeastern guy.
Where's he based out of?
Massachusetts, I believe.
Oh, really? Gosh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I need to network with him more again. He's such a just a good soul, you know what I mean? And I love hearing that about, creators talking about other creators. We have that happen a lot on the show, and I'm so lucky to like have some connection with a lot of these people because I always let them know like, "Hey, you got brought up on the show today." Just, really good kind words just that you know. And I think that makes people's day. I think that's always sweet to like hear other people talk well about others. Um
Absolutely.
but we're approaching the end of the episode here, which is insane. It's such an interesting conversation because I think our ADHD just really matched this morning with how we bounced across like various topics, no matter how brief, and that's always a blast. But you're also it's really rare that we ever like promote like Kickstarters on the show because we do very evergreen material and inspired ink. But you do have a Kickstarter out right now. Do you want to talk a little bit about it right now? And also some of the tiers you're offering because you have a really unique approach to your original art tier, which is your highest tier on there. I'd love to hear
Sure.
more about your mindset on that too.
Absolutely. So, humble listener, let's just pretend you're at a Comic Con right now, and we'll just say you walk by my table. I go, "Oh, hi, how you doing? You enjoying the con?" And they go, "Yeah, I am." "Oh, cool. Where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from here." "Well, let me tell you about my book because I think you're gonna like it." I'm kidding. So, anyways, the Kickstarter is it's called Squawk. It is the Funny Birds of Vulture Culture. This is 2.5, I think, years worth of comics. This is about a family of goth vultures that live and work at their town's dead mall, and it's very funny. And we are doing a Kickstarter for it. I'm trying to keep this in frame so you can see it. We're doing a Kickstarter for it on Kickstarter. We're about 30% funded now, which is pretty good. Goal is 2,500. Just to make sure that everybody who wants a book can get a book because I'm a big believer in comics are for everybody,
Nice.
and anybody who wants a book should be able to get a book. And I'm trying to keep it affordable, but also give you a really nice product as well. So this is kind of a family day in the life comic about gothic retail and the world of the dying mall. So some of our Kickstarter rewards that you can get is you can get a Hawk Topic t-shirt, which is a very, very funny t-shirt. I've seen people wearing them around at cons, after they buy them from my table. And I'm like, cool, you like it. We've got original drawings, book plates. I'm doing a book plate for this book, which is very, very cool for me. I've never done a book plate before. And then the really, really big one that Brandon talked about was this is a digital comic. So I do it digitally. I'd never be able to keep up with it if I didn't do it digitally. I do not have a scanner. I'm the worst comic book artist ever. I do not have a scanner. And so it's all digital. And for $1,000, which I know is a lot to ask for the top tier, but if you pledge $1,000, you will be getting an original hand-drawn comic strip from this comic. It'll be a brand new comic, fleshed out joke, and I will actually post it and it will enter into the canon of Vulture Culture. And if you do it now, it may even wind up in the book because I need time to do it and run to Staples and scan it. So that'll be a completely unique thing because this book is digital, and I'll do as many as people want if they keep giving $1,000. But we have other tiers that are original art too that are much more affordable. So if you wanted to get some original art from this digital book, I'd be happy to draw something for you.
I just love that concept because, a digital creator going like, I'm going to like push myself and do this just for you to like help, fund this and create this. Like you're getting like the truest form of like original art. Like you're getting a new story, like, everything's fresh and new about it. And I think that's super unique. And I haven't heard that come across yet. So really excited for what you're doing, Nick. I really love your attitude and everything you have under development. We're definitely going to be drawing together very often this year. I'm really excited for that as well.
I can't
So
wait.
please, everyone, check out our the spotlight that we did on Nick, and actually we talk more about the Kickstarter and the story and how it came about and everything there. And then we're going to be drawing together on Spilled Ink in the next week or two. I forgot. Next week. And so I'm really hyped. January 16th episode. And this is all leading into the Road to IC3 Indie Creator Con, which is happening March 15th. It's going to have 150 indie creators there from everywhere from big leagues like Tom Sicoli and Jim Rugg to, the Cosmic Lion Island to Apollo City to all, it's Comix Wellspring is going to have a whole table there. We're going to be selling a new product there, which I'm so excited to like be sharing with everyone. In fact, by the time this episode is out, you already know about it. So please check it out. Buy your paper now. Get it in time for the con. We'll be actually having the paper at the con too for people to order. So please, any questions, shoot us a message. We're more than happy to answer. And we're excited to see everyone at IC3 this year. It's going to be such a great time. So thank you all for hanging. Nick, thank you for your time once more and for everything you do. We're so hyped to see you at the con. And, as always, thanks for hanging. Stay inspired and stay creative.